Hi, everybody. Checking in. I really wanted to create a quick post that outlined my testimony, mostly because when I was going through my own crisis in my marriage, I could not find resources around women that had experienced infidelity, but on the other side, not as the betrayed individual, but as the wayward woman. And I felt so isolated and alone that I was the only person in the world who had done this. And of course, it brought a lot of shame and guilt. And so I wanted to make sure my story was out there for people to find, to know that they're not alone, that there's a way to come back from such a destructive force and a destructive decision. And so sharing my testimony is one of the best ways of giving real time what I walked through just a little over 3 years ago. And of course, the redemptive story that follows with my husband deciding to come back to the marriage. And so I'm going to read to you a very kind of condensed version of my testimony. And I certainly pray over this video that it would reach the right people that needed to hear this, that they would get a source of hope and strength from something like this, to know that if they're in this position, they find themselves in the aftermath of such devastating betrayal, that there is a way to walk forward and to walk out of this, and to also, as an individual, feel whole and complete after you've done something that you really didn't think you were capable of. And so with that, let me tell you a little bit about, my backstory. Of course, for you to truly understand how far Brett and I have come, you have to know where we started. How the layers of our past shaped who we became, and how grace realistically rewrote our future. So I was born and raised right here in North Texas. My parents did a good job raising us, but of course, their marriage came to an end, much like 50% of the United States married couples do. And that was really difficult for me. And I chose to survive through disconnection. And because of that, I became fiercely independent. I was emotionally guarded and very self-reliant. And so as I grew up as a young adult, I really just did not learn how to heal properly, and I didn't have the tools to emotionally regulate. And because of that, I blamed others for a lot of my problems, and started to develop what I call a hard heart, which ultimately is just insensitive to the needs of others, very focused on yourself. But God was great and gracious to me, and did place my husband in my life in 2011. And he was so different than I was. I mean, just very secure, successful, steady. He knew what he wanted, and I loved that he knew that. And so I wanted to be a part of that. And I made him my anchor. Realistically, I even probably put a little bit of him on a pedestal, and that further devalued my own identity and left me really broken, at least in terms of what I thought marriage would be and what I thought happiness would look like. And so in our first year of marriage, 2011, was really hard. We were trying to figure out how this whole marriage thing worked. We brought a lot of expectations in from our former parents' marriages, so how they did it, we took and brought into our marriage without asking, hey, is this good for us? And then we didn't have children. We were unable to, really. And so we just became focused on work. And it was all about how can we, become successful in our careers, to start fulfilling the void that was inside of us, that felt like, our marriage, we should, really feel all those loving feelings all the time. And we didn't. And so we became more like business partners, or roommates is what I would say to my husband. And it was lonely, and we felt disconnected, and ultimately I felt invisible. I know for me, Brett really had his mind made up of what he wanted, and without knowing it, became very critical of me and wanted to tell me how I was wrong a lot. And I just felt like he didn't like me for who I was. Though that wasn't true, that's what I had perceived. And that kind of coupled with this year of numbness. Of course, we're kind of all coming out of COVID in 2022. I, on a typical work business meeting, met someone who just kind of doted over me, gave me affection. I was in a bad space mentally, and I started to overshare. I shared about my feelings, what I was going through in my marriage, and of course, this person seemed like they were there for me, right? And in reality, We were both just trying to get something that was missing inside of us filled with this other person. And that's what led to both a physical and an emotional affair that lasted about 5 weeks. So as I mentioned, I never thought I was capable of something like this. And looking back on it now, I know how it all happened. It's some of the stuff I've already mentioned, but it was multiple small steps, little ways I was chipping away at my conscience and justifying my actions and behavior. These lies or what led me to be able to do something like that. And we all have to kind of look back at ourselves and what we have a propensity to tell ourselves to justify actions or behaviors, whether that's something big like an affair that seems so common sense, or even just the way we treat each other within our marriage. So anyways, I did kind of wake up from that stupor. I realized what I was experiencing obviously was not love. It's something called limerence, and it's just a type of infatuation, and really it's a tool used for escapism. And so I knew that was what was happening. The full weight of what was going on was on my shoulders, and I was just ready to come out with the truth. I will say I called a lot of therapists. I got a lot of different opinions. It only took about 2 weeks, but it was 50-50 worth of opinions, and 50% said to tell them and 50% said to not. God placed it on my heart that I needed to, right? That's the conviction of the Holy Spirit. And so I sat Brett down, I told him, and he was devastated, and he left immediately and filed for divorce 9 days later and did not speak to me for about 4 months. We did start to have some minor breakthrough when it would come to counseling. We were seeing the same counselor but separately, and that led to some limited conversation. I started attending Watermark Church. They have a program called Re-Engage. Highly recommend it for anybody who might be listening to this video. It's a free resource, and they do a great job at helping marriages heal and dealing with people that are in crisis. But I invited Brett, and he did not want to come for many months, but he ultimately came kind of more to check the box because we were only like a week or two out from mediation. But God was moving, right? And he put on Brett's heart that he needed to decide not to decide. And so he paused the mediation, and that led to a rapid period of unveiling for himself and healing for me. We were living separately. He was working on himself. I was working on myself. And there were further things that he needed to reveal to me at a later date. And he did do that. Later in that year of 2022, he did share that during the separation, he was engaged in his own affair and had not been sharing it with anyone, including his therapist. And so he felt like he was living a double life and a double standard. And as we were coming out of this, realizing that neither one of us had the ability to really emotionally carry each other because we both had done this really hurtful thing, I knew one person had to step up and lead. And I knew for me that was me in my marriage. And so I chose to forgive Brett very quickly. I don't always recommend that for people, but I was able to forgive quickly because I felt so strongly how much God had forgiven me for what I had done. And I was so thankful to be washed by the blood, to be clean again from something that I had done. And I just took that same principle and applied it to Brett, and that allowed me to move through the healing process very quickly. I also was ready to recover. I mean, at this point, we're about 8 months separated. I didn't want to prolong the suffering anymore, and somebody was able to speak those words and give me almost confirmation that that's okay if that's what was best for me in my marriage. And I was able to do that. And so we really then just started focusing on therapy, wanting to change, lots of prayers, support group, re-engage, affair recovery, different things that the church obviously would offer. But the goal was really to try to understand each other, why people have affairs, why people draw hard, lines and boundaries in the sand, and then how we can be better spouses for each other going forward, knowing that we are going to fail. But you do have, right? We have a choice to remain faithful in our, covenant of marriage. So our journeys were separate. They were very different, but we did ultimately come back, rebuild together. And I share this story, and so does, my husband, Brett, solely for the glory of God, solely for those of you who are out there trying to find a resource of what to do when you've experienced something like this. It totally flips your world upside down, whether it's open and known and every day is just total misery and suffering with people that know about what's happening, and you feel that either condemnation or of course such anger and hurt from that betrayal. Or you might be on the other side. You're having to be secretive because you have children and maybe you don't want a lot of people to know, and you just feel like you're completely alone because nobody knows what you're going through and you're suffering totally on the inside. We experienced it, and we experienced it all from, again, slander, wide known information about what happened, and the judging eyes of others, all the way to having just total grace and forgiveness from so many people in the community. And I know that unfortunately infidelity is something that's incredibly prominent. I think there's some estimations out there that something like 70% of marriages do experience some form of infidelity, and infidelity can be anything from porn watching to emotional affairs, where even emotionally engaged in something with someone, of course, all the way to physical affairs, even sexual addiction and other types of financial betrayals and all of that. And so if you add all that together, you realize that this is a human experience. And though it is not fair, nor it's right or justified, we realize that we have a choice to reconcile. And that choice really depends on your relationship with God and your relationship with the other person. But forgiveness starts vertically from Christ, and then depending on how that other person is behaving in terms of whether they're safe enough to reconcile, there might be an actual relationship between the two people, but forgiveness can still be granted for that person regardless if reconciliation is an option. And so my goal is to provide some of these resources on my website. Feel free to go there and check out free meetup groups, as well as online courses, testimonial, and more blog information. Sign up for the newsletter. I send out occasional bulletins and newsletters that go over things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. But here to help. You can of course reach out. I also offer complimentary discovery calls just to see what you're going through. Is it something I could do to help you as you walk this journey out? I know I had a coach, and it was incredibly helpful to have that person just be a source of truth and hope for me whenever I felt like I was in my darkest moments. So thank you all, and I look forward to speaking with you.